Until recently, Uppers was a game that never saw life outside of Japan. It has subsequently seen a release on the PC, which by all means is the superior version, but seeing its original incarnation on the Vita is still impressive to this day. The experience takes on a cel-shaded aesthetic and is essentially a beat-em-up that sees you taking on the role of one of several characters as you make your way through each stage. The objective is to simply take on as many foes as you can, all the while impressing your fanfare by performing intricate combos and special attacks. Now, the most spectacular aspect of the visuals has to be how many enemies and NPCs can appear on the screen at any one time. Whilst fighting it out, you'll be accompanied by a group of your fans that at times can fully surround the fight. It manages to maintain a solid frame rate throughout, and upon executing one of the many special attacks at your disposal, the entire screen lights up in style and looks absolutely phenomenal on the OLED screen. If you've never got around to checking Uppers out for yourself, it is a game that I highly recommend. At the time of its initial release on the PlayStation 2 in 2001, Final Fantasy X was praised for its visual style that helped the events of the adventure come to life in a way that had not been seen up until that point. Fast forward just over a decade and the HD remaster made its debut on the home consoles as well as the PlayStation Vita. Now, Final Fantasy X was dubbed a groundbreaking success the first time around, so adding a fresh lick of paint to the mix in the form of a high definition upgrade only helped strengthen one of the most beloved entries in the series to date. Seeing this up and running on the Vita is incredible. It delivered the same experience fans knew so well, but this time it was presented in 16:9 with much higher quality textures as well as improved lighting and redesigned character models that helped bring the classic adventure into the modern age. Thanks to the OLED screen on the Vita, the world of Spira has never looked so vibrant. Every location to each and every character, enemy and summon sprang to life on the small screen, and with the added advantage of having the ability to play it wherever you were, made this the best way to play it until the Nintendo Switch version released a few years later. Jet Set Radio originally released on the Sega Dreamcast and was one of the first games to utilize a style of visuals known as cel shading. Around 10 years later, it received a HD re-release for the home systems of the time, with the PlayStation Vita version following shortly after. Although looking at a still picture of the game would lead you to believe that it's presented in 2D, it is actually a fully realized 3D world. It's a simple and vibrant presentation that helps JSR literally pop off your screen, and if you're lucky enough to own an original OLED model of the PlayStation Vita, it manages to look even better. Throughout the entire game, this distinct sense of style is present, from every environment you'll find yourself in to each and every character that's animated in a way to seamlessly blend with all of the incredibly detailed backgrounds. Seeing it up and running on the handheld is a real sight to behold, and in all honesty is one of the best ways to experience this Sega classic today. Although there are a couple of visual imperfections, such as a touch of pop-in and the occasional frame rate dip, there is nothing that truly takes away anything from the overall experience. The PlayStation Vita was home to many incredible fighters, but when it comes to sheer presentation, Street Fighter Cross Tekken has to be one of the most impressive looking of the bunch. It manages to maintain a solid 60 frames per second during each encounter, whilst demonstrating every character and stage in a phenomenal amount of detail. It is unbelievably close to the home console version, with every special move and super art all being present and as flashy as you would expect. Paying close attention to each fight reveals intricate facial animations and subtle graphical touches that dynamically react to the action on screen as well, such as clothing swaying in the wind and particle effects that naturally reflect off each of the characters and the background, which all comes together to help bring an extra layer of depth to the visual style. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit the Vita's native resolution, but it doesn't take away fully from what is on offer. The real star of the show is the frame rate, which is essential when it comes to fighting games. Like I've mentioned, there's many fighters on the system, but for me, Street Fighter Cross Tekken is the clear winner when it simply comes down to looks. Gravity Rush was one of the first games I ever played on the PlayStation Vita. It takes on a really nice cel-shaded visual style that makes the overall experience both striking and memorable. It manages to look entirely unique to anything else available on the system. The environment is entirely open, and coupling this with the gravity mechanic, it soon becomes a real joy just to explore and take in everything that the world has to offer. During cutscenes that depict the narrative, it takes on a really interesting style as well. It's mainly told through beautifully drawn comic book panels that really make make each interaction between characters come to life. It manages to add an extra dimension to the visual aesthetic that the game can truly call its own. Although not the most technically impressive game on the system by any means, is it only manages to hit a resolution of 720 by 408, but the unique style that Gravity Rush deploys more than makes up for its shortcomings. For a fully open world experience that you can take on the go, Gravity Rush is hands down one of the most impressive games to ever appear on the system. The PlayStation Vita was no stranger to quality ports of classic titles, and the Metal Gear Solid HD Collection is one of the finest examples on the machine. Unfortunately, the package doesn't come with Peace Walker like the home console version, and only packs in the second and third adventures, but for what it lacks in overall content, it more than makes up for in looks and gameplay. Now, from a technical standpoint, the image is presented in a resolution of 720 by 448, with the on-screen action maintaining 30 FPS during Metal Gear Solid 3, which is susceptible to some dips during some of the more action-heavy scenes, but it's nothing that entirely spoils the experience. On the other hand, Metal Gear Solid 2 seems to flip between both 30 and 60 FPS depending on your location, with some dips depending on your actions. Just seeing these two games running on the handheld is incredibly easy on the eyes, from the rain that pours down as you blindly jump off a bridge, to the dense vegetation of the Russian jungle that helps conceal your presence. It all looks absolutely phenomenal, and once again proved that the Vita was a powerful machine that packed a serious punch when it came to producing immersive worlds. Macross Delta Scramble was one of those games that unfortunately never saw a release outside of Japan, and it's a bit of a shame as it is no doubt one of the best looking games the Vita ever received. Macross sees players taking control of a wide range of machines that all have the ability to transform into different forms. The action takes place across a wide variety of locations that each bring their own distinct identity to the experience. The real star of the show though is the absolute volume of enemies and effects that appear on the screen at any one time. The action lights up with lasers, smoke trails, particles, and enemy targets that litter the sky as you take on each mission and soar across glistening blue lakes and weave in between the buildings of destroyed cities, all rendered at the Vita's native resolution that results in everything looking crisp. Each machine that you can use is presented in a high level of detail, which really comes into its own during the customization of each. Being able to see and alter individual parts that also appear during gameplay is a really nice touch that makes every change all the more meaningful. The amount of detail each machine sees has also been poured into each of the environments. It all results in an experience that really shows what the Vita is capable of when put into the hands of the right developers. Wipeout has always been synonymous with the PlayStation brand. From Sony's first console right up to the PlayStation 4, the series has continued to innovate and showcase what each machine is capable of. The PlayStation Vita was no different, Wipeout 2048 soon becoming one of the most graphically impressive games to ever release on the handheld. The fact that it was available at launch created a lot of promise for the future, and if it wasn't for Sony's bad decisions when it came to the system, you can only imagine what games would have looked like towards the end of its lifespan. Now, Wipeout has always put a huge emphasis upon lightning fast racing, and the Vita version runs at a full native dynamic resolution that manages to keep the 30 FPS cap on lock. Sure, it would have been nice to have it presented in 60 frames per second, but seeing it running and taking into account the sheer density of each track, as well as the amount of detail that's been produced for each ship and environment, it's an acceptable compromise, and doesn't do that much to alter the overall feel of the game. When you see it in action, you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that it was perhaps running on a home console, mainly thanks to everything that the team were able to achieve on the hardware. So if you're fond of the series and were looking for one of the most impressive handheld versions to play on the go, Wipeout 2048 is no doubt one of the best to choose. Uncharted was the PlayStation Vita's first AAA title, and it proved that it was capable of producing PlayStation 3 quality visuals on a device that you could take with you on the go. Now, the Uncharted series needs no introduction, and although Golden Abyss is nowhere near the same quality of its home console counterparts, it still manages to hold its own and depicts an adventure that can stand side by side with its contemporaries. The first thing to get out of the way is the resolution. Although it's not running natively, it still clocks in at 720 by 408, and when you take into consideration consideration all of the detail that's packed into each environment and character model, it's really impressive how everything looks. As you would expect from an entry in the Uncharted series, you'll find yourself visiting a whole variety of locations, from dense jungles to rundown shanty towns that serve the gameplay well but also showcase what the handheld device can produce. As beautiful as the game can be though, it doesn't come without some drawbacks. Unfortunately, towards the end of the adventure, the experience is prone to severe frame rate dips, which are not totally game breaking but may have the potential to turn some players off. First-person shooters for handhelds were traditionally very tough before the Vita came along, as they often lacked a second analog stick that made most of them nigh-on unplayable. The Vita remedied this issue and introduced Killzone Mercenary as one of the first legitimate handheld first-person shooters. It brought one of the PlayStation's flagship franchises to life in a way that had not been seen up until that point on a handheld device. The visual quality is simply stunning, and at first glance you could be forgiven for thinking that it's running on a PlayStation 3, mainly thanks to the generous use of particle and smoke effects that bring each encounter to life in a truly immersive way. Now, one of the most impressive aspects of Killzone on the Vita is the fact that it's running at the full native resolution that the console facilitates. Of course, that's only 960 by 544, but when you take into account everything that happens on screen, the fact that Guerrilla Games managed to achieve it is absolutely astonishing, and shows that the team behind it are real masters of their craft. From simple reloading animations to the impressive environments that make up the campaign, Killzone Mercenary is a real showcase of the power packed into Sony's last handheld, and only makes me wish that we could see another portable machine from Sony in the future. Well, that does it for today's video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and as always, I'll catch you next time.